Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Open Wounds Podcast. We're going to be talking a little bit about operating from a place of fear and how that can impact us on a daily basis. I know it's been a really heavy time politically in the US because of the elections we just went through. And I know a lot of people are feeling really emotional or really afraid about what's going to happen in our country. I know a lot of people who their president was elected were very afraid of what would happen if they didn't get elected. So we're going to talk a little bit about how fear can impact us, especially when we're coming from a place of complex PTSD and we may have more triggers than a normal, quote unquote, whatever that means, person. And I just want to keep this brief today, but hopefully help you see how fear can be impacting your behaviors and addressing it in a way that's beneficial and is going to result in better outcomes for you. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and let's get to it. Okay, so I just want to start by acknowledging that this situation that the U.S. has found itself in currently has created a lot of fear in a lot of people, especially those who are in minority groups, LGBTQ+, also, Black communities. And I feel like the Muslim communities as well. I'm trying not to leave anybody out, but of course we could be here all day acknowledging the people who could be feeling fear right now around what's happened in our country. I also know, and I'm just trying to be open-minded and process and put myself in other people's shoes, because I have tons of family that voted for Trump. I know they did, and they were very adamant and loud and proud about it. And when I spoke to them about why they were going to vote for that person, it was based on fear. I'm afraid that this is going to happen. I'm afraid that that's going to happen. I'm afraid that, a lot of it was about abortion and killing babies. I'm afraid that these babies, are going to die because we don't ban abortion. So there's a lot of fear coming from people in how they're reacting to the situation at hand. There's also, a lot of rhetoric we hear in the media, like, oh, rights are being rolled back, or what was the one thing? Kids are getting transgendered surgeries in school. And a lot of this stuff is not actually founded and based in any type of real thing that's happening, but it's playing on our fears. And this is coming from both Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or whoever you listen to. Most of these media outlets are creating a sense of fear in us, because then we watch more and we will tune in because, oh, what's going to happen next? And did this happen? And did that happen? And it creates an exacerbated hypervigilance, especially for those of us who have complex PTSD, where our baseline is already very hypervigilant. Or we might vacillate between disassociation and feeling hopeless, like it doesn't matter if I vote or not, it's out of my hands, there's nothing we can do, we're screwed, we're cooked, whatever the kids want to call it now. But I feel like you can have a lot of fear coming up right now, especially with these unknowns of what we saw with the January 6th insurrection happening. Do we think something like that's going to happen again, where we don't feel safe in our communities, where we are worried there's going to be a police state? I could just go on and on and on just with things I have heard. And I don't watch a lot of media because the media tends to reinforce fear in me and get me in an anxious state and in a place where I am constantly wondering what's going to happen next, if this person does this and this happens. And it becomes this chronic state of almost like adrenal fatigue, or like cortisol being charged through our bodies all the time. And we become, mistrusting of those around us. We have a harder time connecting to our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, our family members, because we're thinking, oh, well, if they do this, then they do, especially let's take the example of what I saw yesterday, which was somebody had shared a tweet, or it was a thread, or I don't know where the fuck it came from, but it was a guy saying, your body, my choice. And so I can understand how, as a woman, if you read a man saying that, you can take that as a threat to rape and to harm you. and to physically assault you or to force you to have, carry a baby to term that you don't want to have a baby or whatever, right? And I can also see that perhaps that person was just being antagonistic and running their mouth and full of shit and not actually ever going to act on that. Now, I'm not trying to invalidate the fact that these things do happen. I'm just trying to let us look at things from multiple lenses, because when we can take ourselves out of that fear response and look at it through another lens. I'm not saying we're not allowed to be afraid. I'm not saying we shouldn't have fear come up. That's a very natural response. But when we get stuck in a repetitive fear-based place, it's very difficult for us to make the best cognitive choice. Our prefrontal cortex is turned off at that point, and we're running on instincts and impulses, which is not the most logical, relaxed, calm place to be operating from. So if we go back to that tweet or whatever the hell that guy said, yes, that's a horrible thing to say, right? Everyone should have autonomy in their body. Everyone should be able to make the choice they want to. But I want to point out, when we take and reshare these things and retweet them and get riled up about them and text our friend, did you see that? I can't believe these guys are saying that. We need to be afraid for our safety. It's reinforcing and reestablishing this fear response in our body, right? And honestly, I don't think it's very productive, because if we're in a state of fear, we're not thinking proactively, we're thinking reactively. We're like, oh fuck, what's going to happen? And do I need to start carrying a gun and mace? And oh my gosh, there's going to be rapists everywhere. Like, it causes these exaggerated fear responses, hypervigilances, like I've said, right? So if we can kind of pull ourselves out of it and say, you know what? I don't know that guy. Like, let's just take that tweet for whatever it was worth. I don't know where he lives. He could be a bot. He could be a Russian thing sent to, what we've seen, that there's people that are just spamming the American people to be divisive, right? This could be not even a real person saying this, especially with the way AI is going. There's a lot of stuff happening online that is not actually a real human saying these things. And even if it was, what are the chances of me having to interact with that specific guy who said that? And can I look for invalidating experiences in my personal life and in my current immediate surroundings? So if we take that example with that guy in that fucking tweet, I can say my 21-year-old son is not a rapist. He respects women. He respects the trans community. He respects LGBTQ people. He is an example to me of a safe male person. My husband, my cousin, my whatever you want to use in your situation. If it's your neighbor, if it's a coworker, if it's a boss, look for not the, I don't know if disconfirming is a word, but basically look around you and find evidence to the contrary of what you're afraid of, right? So if you're afraid of, police brutality, you may have a harder time finding a cop who's nice and who's been generous and kind to you. Or maybe when you got pulled over, they didn't give you a ticket. Or maybe when, your neighbor's house got broken into, they came and they talked to you if you'd seen anything, and they were kind and they were polite. Like, you have to look for the experiences you've had in the past that go against this fear that's coming up in you. So you can take it with anything. I get that phobias are a little bit different, and I'm not going to get into phobias because that's a completely different thing. But I'm just talking about, we have a lot of opportunities to latch onto fear right now in our country and even globally. What's happening in Israel and Palestine, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening all around the world. There are plenty of opportunities for us to be afraid and to fall into this place of operating on a very reactive, fear-based place, right? And so it's not that we want to put our heads in the sand and be like, la, 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 good vibes only, sunshine and rainbows. No, That's not what I'm talking about. You can feel your feelings. You can express your feelings, journal them, talk to somebody about them, scream into the void or take, a hot bath, whatever you do to process your feelings and help them move through your body. And we have other podcast episodes about that, right? The tools that you can use to help regulate yourself. So whatever your go-to tool that works for you to help regulate, I would recommend when you're feeling that fear of like, oh, fuck, what is going to happen? Go to those tools and use them. And if one's not working, try a different one. But I'm really wanting to encourage everybody right now that when we're operating from a place of fear, and when we're operating from a place of like this, like anxiousness and constant activation and constant like, oh my God, oh, this is terrible. Did you see that? Did you hear that? Did you see what he said at this rally? It's just bringing it up. And we're staying like in this whacked out, fucked up place instead of being able to say, I have control over my emotions. I have control over what I allow in my life. I, as an adult, we're only talking about adults here because kids are a different scenario, have control over who I let be around me. I have control over who I listen to. I can turn the TV off. I can turn the radio off. If I'm in a restaurant that has a news channel playing that's really just upsetting me, I can take my food to go and leave. Like there's a lot of more power that we have than we are using. And so I'm trying to encourage you guys, especially when we're in this very chaotic time in our country. And I'm, to my understanding, I don't think it's going to get any easier in the coming years, especially because, this is a very divisive time for our country. And because so many people are latching onto this fear, are latching onto the reactive, like it's us versus them. It's the Republicans versus the Democrats. It's the pro this versus pro that versus anti this versus anti that. When we get stuck in this, it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And I see so many people getting stuck in this state right now, which is why I wanted to come on here really briefly and just encourage everybody like, hey, yes, be mad, take action, do whatever you want to do in your communities to protect yourself, to keep yourself safe, but acknowledge that operating from a place of fear is, number one, probably 99% of the time not going to get you the results you want. It's really not a place of empowerment. It's a place, I talked about this on the last episode with being seen. When you're afraid, you're giving your power away to these external things, if it be our government, if it be the police. And I get that there are things, legitimate things, like police brutality and things happening. And I want to acknowledge like that is very valid. It happens. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. However, if all day long you're thinking about the thing you're afraid of happening to you, are you going to be happy? Are you going to be fulfilled? Are you going to have the bandwidth to focus on your future and achieving goals and feeling calm and feeling like you can manage your life? Like your life is going to feel very unmanageable and out of control if you're staying afraid and upset and anxious and whacked out about things. So I really just, I'm trying to get this done quickly because I have to leave to go pick up my kid from school. But I really just want to kind of reframe for all of us. Like, yes, shitty things are happening. Lots of stuff sucks that people don't like on both sides. Like, people are upset on both sides of this equation. Even the people whose presidential candidate won are still really not happy. And I think that's going to keep going if we can't check ourselves and look in the mirror and say, am I operating on a day-to-day basis and making choices based on fear? Or am I operating from a place of empowerment and confidence and knowing that I trust myself and I trust that I can do what's best for me and I can make decisions that are in my power? The ones I have that are in my power, I can make those, and I can make them from a place that's not fear-based and from a place of calm, grounded centeredness. And so I don't remember which episode it was in the numerical order, but I do know it's the one about healing from a place of safety is a really good one. and the episode about tools for, managing complex PTSD is a really good episode to revisit right now with what's happening, to kind of help ground yourself, help center yourself, make sure that you are taking care of yourself first so that you can give back to your communities. Because that's another area, is we may want to help people around us that we are like, oh my gosh, are they going to be okay? We need to be grounded and safe and stable before we start pouring from an empty cup, right? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It is a little shorter. And if you have any questions, you can email openwoundspodcast@gmail.com. We are going to be posting these on YouTube now, and it's going to be on all the platforms for podcasts as well. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Listen, share with your friends and family, and stay safe out there.